On a single night in March 1985, two men sat in the same theater, in the same row of seats, nominated for the very same prize, Best Actor, for playing the two leads in the very same film. One of them, that night, was about to win the Academy Award. The other was about to lose it. And here is the part that has unsettled Hollywood for 40 years. Within a few years of this night, both of them, the winner and the loser, would all but vanish from the movies, gone. Two of the most celebrated performances of the decade, and then nothing. It happened so cleanly that people inside the industry began to whisper about it. They called it a curse. And not just any curse, but the curse of one specific film, Amadeus. Now, the man who won that night has actually confessed what happened to him in his own words, and it is brutal. We will get to him. But this story isn't about him. It's about the other one. The one who lost. The one who walked out of that theater empty-handed, at the absolute summit of his powers, and then did something so strange, so quiet, and so badly misunderstood, that for years almost everyone assumed the curse had simply swallowed him too. His name is Tom Hulce. And the question I want you to hold in your head for the next 15 minutes is this. Was Tom Hulce a victim of the Amadeus curse, or was he the only man alive who quietly figured out how to beat it? Because the answer is not what you think. So let's get into it. First, the obvious question. Is this curse even real? And the uncomfortable truth is that it kind of is. Hollywood has whispered about an Oscar curse since the late 1930s, when an actress named Louise Rayner won Best Actress 2 years running, back-to-back, and then watched her entire career collapse into nothing, almost overnight. And the most famous modern version comes straight out of this exact movie. The man who won that night, F. Murray Abraham, saw his film career stall so completely afterward that insiders coined a term for it. They named the whole phenomenon after him. They called it F. Murray Abraham syndrome, the name they give a performer who hits one towering peak and then, somehow, can never climb back up. So that is the shadow hanging over this story, a real documented pattern, where this one film seems to swallow the very people who shine brightest inside it. Now hold that thought, because to understand whether the curse ever truly caught Tom Hulce, you first have to understand something strange about who he was, long before the curse could ever reach him. And it starts with him playing a horse. He grew up in Detroit, the youngest of 4 kids. A boy who originally wanted to be a singer until his voice broke in his teens, and he pivoted with this almost frightening decisiveness into acting. And the very first thing he did was give himself a deadline, exactly 1 decade to make it, 10 years. Then he packed up and went to New York City to find out if he could. When he got there, he didn't chase film and he didn't chase fame. He landed an apprenticeship at the New York Shakespeare Festival, learning the craft the slow, old-fashioned way on a real stage. And within a single month of arriving, he got hired for the Broadway production of Equus, the dark play about a deeply troubled teenage boy. But here is the detail almost nobody mentions. He wasn't hired to play the boy. He was hired to play one of the horses. That was the job. A young man in a horse costume at the back of the stage. Then somebody decided his time was better spent understudying the lead, so they pulled him out of the horse suit and had him learn the role of Alan Strang instead, a part which, among other things, required 9 full minutes of total nudity on a Broadway stage in front of paying strangers every single night. And 9 months later, they finally put him on. He was 20 years old, standing opposite Anthony Hopkins. He had gone from background horse to carrying one of the most punishing roles of the decade. Now, you would think a kid in that position would just try to copy the famous actor he was replacing. Tom Hulce did the exact opposite. He said, and this is genuinely the most important sentence of his life, that he realized he was a different actor and that he was going to play the part his own way, or not at all. And it gets better, because during that same run of Equus, a big television offer came his way. Real money, the kind of break a struggling young actor is supposed to leap at, and he turned it down, flat, because, in his own words, at that point in his life, the stage was all there was, and he was going to do it right. Sit with that. Before he was famous, before he had a single dollar to his name, this man was already turning down television to protect a play. And that one instinct, that quiet refusal to grab the bigger spotlight, is the exact reason the Amadeus curse was always going to bounce right off of him. The curse feeds on people who cling to the summit, and Hulce, at 20, had already decided the summit was never the point. But before he could prove that, he first had to become the single biggest thing in the world, for exactly 1 year. The year was 1984. The director, Milos Forman, was casting the film of Amadeus, the story of Mozart, told through the poisoned, obsessive jealousy of his rival Salieri. And every serious young actor on the planet wanted to be Mozart. The list of who was in the running is almost unbelievable. David Bowie wanted it. The dancer, Mikhail Baryshnikov, was in the mix. Kenneth Branagh was so certain he had landed it that he wrote in his memoir that he thought it was a done deal, right up until Forman told him they were casting Americans. And Mark Hamill, fresh off Star Wars, went in too, and Forman turned him down with a line so blunt it is almost funny. He told Hamill that nobody would ever believe Luke Skywalker as Mozart. And the man Forman chose, over every one of them, was a stage actor most of America had never heard of. And here is what kind of performer Tom Hulce was. He did not fake the genius. He sat at a piano 4 hours a day until the playing was real. That is actually him on the screen, even the moment where Mozart lies flat on his back and plays with his hands flipped backward over the keys. No body double, no trickery. He learned to conduct. He got the real thing first, then built the character on top of it. He went so deep that Elizabeth Berridge, the actress playing his wife, later said he stayed in character to a point that unnerved everyone around him. He was, she said, like a completely different person. And then of course there is the laugh. You know the one. That high, broken, slightly unhinged giggle. Most people assume it was written into the script. It wasn't. Forman simply walked up to him one day and said, "Give me something extreme." And Hulce reached down somewhere inside himself and pulled that out. But here is the eerie part. 9 months later, back in a sound booth, re-recording dialogue, Hulce tried to do the laugh again. The exact same laugh, the one now permanently burned into film history. And he couldn't. He physically could not find it. He said, in his own words, that he was never able to make that sound, except in front of a camera. So feel how strange that is. The single most iconic thing this man ever created was something he could only access while pretending to be someone else. Take away the camera, and it vanished. As if the only place Tom Hulce was ever allowed to be that big, that free, that fully himself, was inside a character. File that away, because it is going to matter by the end of this. And so now it is Oscar night, and here is the small cruelty the award story always skips. Hulce and Abraham were both nominated for Best Actor. The same category, two men from the same film, splitting the exact same pool of votes, right down the middle. One of them was about to walk straight into the curse. The other was about to do something nobody understood. Abraham won, and in his acceptance speech, on the biggest night of his life, he said the one thing missing was Tom Hulce, standing up there beside him. A gutting thing to say to the man you just beat. And then the curse came for him. Don't take my word for it, take his. Because decades later, F. Murray Abraham confessed exactly what happened. He said, and I am quoting him, "I became arrogant. I became too demanding. I became full of myself." The roles he was offered afterward were, in his words, just terrible, and the money was big, but he kept turning them down, waiting for something worthy of his new opinion of himself. And he said the thing that should be tattooed on the wall of every actor on earth: you cannot do that for long without Hollywood forgetting you. After a while, the phone just stopped ringing. That right there is the curse, laid bare by the one man who lived inside it. It is not supernatural. It is a trap built out of ego. You hit the summit, you decide you are owed it forever, and the industry quietly moves on while you sit there waiting. And by every law of that curse, the same fate should have taken Tom Hulce. Same film, same nomination, same blinding peak. So why, and this is the entire mystery of his life, did his disappearance look nothing at all like Abraham's? The answer starts with the films he chose next. On the surface, they look exactly like a man being slowly strangled by the curse. But look closer, and you are watching a man steering. He had the Oscar nomination. The obvious move was to chase leading man stardom. Instead, in 1988, he made a small film called Dominic and Eugene, playing a gentle, intellectually disabled man putting his twin brother through medical school. Tender, raw, with zero vanity. A Golden Globe nomination, and it barely found an audience. And then even more telling. In 1990, at the height of his fame, he ran straight back to Broadway and originated the lead in Aaron Sorkin's A Few Good Men. He was the very first Daniel Kaffee, the role Tom Cruise would later make world famous on the screen. It earned him a Tony nomination. But think about the choice. The movies were begging for him, and he went and stood on a stage instead. Then he wandered even further off the map. He played the personal film projectionist of Joseph Stalin, and in the drama Fearless, he stripped away every scrap of the manic, wild energy everyone thought was him, and played it still and silent and interior, and he was hauntingly compelling, which proves the one thing the studios never understood. That childlike wildness was never his ceiling. It was a tool, something he could pick up and put down at will. The range was always there. Hollywood just kept asking for the one trick, over and over. But here is the twist. And this is the part where every other video about this man quietly chickens out. Because the real reason Hollywood could never figure out where to put Tom Hulce was not about his acting at all. It was about something that the studios of that era literally did not know how to print on a movie poster. And once you understand what it was, the whole curse story falls apart and turns into something far more honest. If you are the kind of person who would rather hear the real version of a story instead of the sanded down one, this right here is your nudge to subscribe, because that true version is the entire reason this channel exists. Okay, here is what they all leave out. At the peak of his fame, when he should have been grabbing every leading man role on offer, Tom Hulce kept making a very different kind of choice. In the mid-1980s, he performed in Larry Kramer's The Normal Heart, not once, but twice. The furious, grieving, landmark drama about the earliest days of the AIDS crisis, written and staged when most of Hollywood would not even say the word out loud. Then, in the mid-90s, he won an Emmy playing a gay pediatrician in The Heidi Chronicles. These were not accidents. They were a man, quietly, repeatedly planting a flag. Because Tom Hulce is gay. He said so himself, publicly, in 2008, and he did not do it for a magazine cover. He did it to finally kill a rumor that had chased him for years, a fabricated story claiming he had a wife and a daughter. He set the record straight on his own terms. Now lay that over the era, the 1980s and 1990s. The leading man Hollywood was selling had to be smooth, easy to read, marketable to every corner of America, and unspoken but absolute, quietly straight. The whole machine ran on actors willing to shrink themselves into that shape. And here was a performer whose entire gift, all the way back to that horse costume, was the exact opposite of shrinking. A man whose whole talent was being too fully, too vividly himself, paired with a private truth that the studio system of that time simply had no slot for. So when people say Tom Hulce resisted packaging, that is the polite phrase. The honest one is that the package they were selling required him to be someone he was not. And he had already told you, at 20, naked on a Broadway stage, his own way, or not at all. Which changes the entire question. It is no longer, did the curse take him? Now it is, when a man like that finally walks away, is it a tragedy or the first free decision of his whole life? In 1996, on his way out the door, he gave his voice to Quasimodo. So read that casting one more time. The outsider, the one locked in a tower, looking down at a world that had decided what he was, long before it ever met him, with a heart bigger than the entire city beneath him. Of course it fit him perfectly. It is almost a self-portrait. And then he did the thing that confused everyone. For the next 30 years, he did not slowly fade out, the way Abraham did, waiting by a phone that had stopped ringing. He decided, in his own words, the choice to quit acting was made in a single second, and he never once looked back. He moved to Seattle, a city the film industry treats like the dark side of the moon, and he was clear-eyed about why. Acting, he said, is service. You serve someone else's vision, but producing is vision itself. Choosing the project, assembling the pieces, fighting the battles that money alone can never win, and that, not the spotlight, was the thing that actually lit him up. So everyone assumed the lights had finally gone out on Tom Hulce, and they were about to be proven spectacularly wrong, because the second act of his life makes the first one look small. He co-directed an enormous 6-hour, 2-night stage adaptation of John Irving's The Cider House Rules. He shepherded a festival of one-man plays that swept the Obie Awards. And in 2007, he was the lead producer on Spring Awakening, a raw electric rock musical pulled from an 1891 German play about teenage desire and the brutal institutions built to crush it, about young people ordered to stay silent, to stay small, to stay hidden. Tell me that theme doesn't sound personal. Spring Awakening won 8 Tony Awards, including Best Musical, and Tom Hulce stood on that stage holding a Tony. 23 years after he lost that Oscar, he did not claw his way back into the spotlight he had left. He built a brand new one, somewhere the old rules could never reach him, and he kept going. American Idiot, Ain't Too Proud, The Temptations musical, 11 Tony nominations, and then, in 2023, he slipped quietly back behind a microphone for one last job to voice Quasimodo one final time for a little Disney short, The Outsider, returning to wave just once from the tower, on his terms, always on his terms. So now, finally, we can answer the question we opened with. Was Tom Hulce a victim of the Amadeus curse? No. And the difference between him and the man who beat him that night is the entire lesson. The Amadeus curse is real, but it only catches the people who cannot let go of the summit. Abraham said it himself. He got arrogant, he got demanding, he waited, and the phone went quiet. The curse is a trap built out of needing the spotlight to stay exactly where it was. And, to his enormous credit, Abraham did claw his way out of it, decades later, with the Grand Budapest Hotel and Homeland and the White Lotus. He beat it the hard way, by surviving it. But Tom Hulce never needed to beat it, because he was never holding on in the first place. You cannot trap a man in a spotlight he already decided he did not want. The curse went looking for his ego, and it found an empty room. And here is the deepest irony. Go back to that laugh, the one he could only make in front of a camera. For most of his early life, a character was the only place Tom Hulce was allowed to be the full size he actually was. The costume was permission. Then he built a life, in Seattle, in the theater, out loud about who he was, where he did not need the costume anymore. And the moment that became true, the movies just stopped being necessary. He played Mozart, remember? A man whose gift was so ungovernable that the world could be lit up by it, but could never ever contain it. And then Tom Hulce went, and quietly lived the exact same thing, except his version does not end in a pauper's grave. It ends with a man holding a Tony in a city he loves, finally as big, off-camera, as the character that made him famous. The film career was not the curse. It was not even the point. It was just the place he stood, for a little while he figured out where he actually wanted to be. Drop a comment and tell me which Hulce performance hits the hardest for you. And if the only thing you have ever seen him in is Animal House, then watch Amadeus tonight. But this time, don't watch the laugh. Watch the eyes underneath it. That is the part Hollywood never figured out what to do with. See you in the next one.